This is Exploring Best Practices for Meaningful and Engaging Online Learning. We had a little brief discussion beforehand about how awkward we all feel up on a pedestal here, so sorry about that, but we're looking forward to the session. We're going to probably run through it a little quicker because we want to wrap up by 11:30 and we getting off to a little bit of a late start. So I'm going to introduce us all, talk a little bit about what we're going to do in the session, and then get right to it. My name is Dr. Lohnes Watulak. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Educational Technology and Literacy in the College of Ed, and I'm very happy to have some wonderful colleagues from the same department here with me today. So we have Dr. William Sadera, Dr. Liyan Macaulay, Linda Macaulay, and Dr. Liyan Song. And they're all wonderful folks, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to give you their complete biography, but hopefully some of you know them, and if not, come say hi after the presentation. So the overview for the session, we're going to treat it sort of like a typical panel discussion. I've got some questions that we all sort of came up amongst ourselves that I'm going to ask the panel to respond to on four broad topics: the design of online learning activities, fostering collaboration and community among online learners, strategies for feedback and evaluation in online courses, and the technological design of the course environment. During each of these broad topics, as I said, I'm going to ask some questions, we'll get some feedback, but I'm going to show you in a moment a way that I hope, and we're going to take this in the spirit of experimentation, which we often have to do when using technology, especially not for the first time, but you know, in some of the first times you're using it, to try to get the audience involved and being able to ask questions in each of these subsections and in each of these discussions, rather than having you all hold it till the end. So I'll show you how we're going to do that in a moment. And then hopefully at the end we will have some time for just some traditional audience question and answer period. So that's sort of the general plan for the session. So the way we're going to do this is using software called polleverywhere.com. It's actually a website. It's free software. It's free for up to 40 respondents. I didn't actually anticipate that we would have a lot more than 40 people in the room, so I opted for the free account. So that might be my bad, and I apologize for that. So 40 of you at a time per poll, and we have 4 different polls for the 4 different topic areas. 40 of you at a time will be able to experiment with this, but perhaps not all of you are going to be interested in doing this anyway. And like I said, we will have some time at the end for traditional Q&A. But Poll Everywhere uses a variety of different ways to have you interact. You can use text messaging, so this is something you probably don't often tell your students, but you can feel free to pull out your phones. If you are getting a signal, which I know is sometimes challenging on campus, but I was getting a signal okay in the back of the room over there. And during a presentation, during a particular question, if any of you are familiar with American Idol or any of those shows where you text in a response, right? Maybe you've been to the ballpark at Camden Yards where they want you to vote for a particular song. It's the same sort of thing. You're going to text a particular code, and that's going to be the to field in your message. And then you're going to text a particular number and then your question using the number. And so there'll be instructions for this on every slide that we ask you to poll, but I just want to give the very quick overview. If you don't have a phone or you prefer not to use a phone, you can do this via the web as well. So, and if you don't, for example, in your classes, you don't want your students to pull out their phone, but you happen to be in a computer lab or have tablets, you can use the website. So this will be, again, up on every slide, but the other option is to do pollev.com/SarahLW, so that's my sort of account, and submit a code and do it through the website as well. So those are just a couple of quick options. I just give you that. And again, in the spirit of experimentation, I've used this in classes. Most of the time it works. Occasionally it glitches, so if that's the case, we'll go with plan B because we always have a plan B with technology. Sound good? Okay. So let's start off. Again, so this is the first poll. If for those of you who are thinking about perhaps submitting a question, maybe it's in response to something one of the panelists say, maybe it's a question you have on your own, what you would do is pull out your phone and in the to field, the message field, text 332574, so that's the number where it says to, and then in where you type your message to us, you type 37607, a space, and then your question. Okay. So let's, and then hopefully the responses will show up as they go, and we'll have a little bit of we can see that as it goes. So starting with our regularly scheduled programming, the first topic is the design of online learning activities. So I wanted to ask our panelists to perhaps think about and respond to what kinds of pedagogical strategies do you use when designing for online learning? For example, I know some of my colleagues and I have used modules, case studies, group work, but just really broadly, what are some of the activities that you think about when you're designing online learning environments? We want to start with Bill? Sure. Got that.
So, like Sarah had said, the three of us have taught online classes together and separately, and taught each other's classes and so on. So we'll have maybe similar ideas. I'll start with one that may be familiar to you, and then as we move along, Doctors Macaulay and Song can help to fill in the ones that I didn't address. The first one, and maybe the one that may be most familiar to traditional education, would be the use of cases. Cases work very well in helping to create a real context for what's being learned. As with all online learning, the most important part of any instructional activity is the detail and the focus, making sure that everything that you're asking your students to do is clear and accurate and understandable. Following along with each of the activities, keeping in contact with your students and noting what your expectations are is very important. So in a case, as you might expect, you'd give an example. We all teach education, so a lot of our courses are theory-oriented or process-oriented, and not unlike the problem-solving examples that were given this morning. So a case might be a situation in which a student has a specific problem that they have to solve, or a specific instance in a classroom. That's going to be something to battle against, so maybe it's really important we had these mics. If you all start dancing, that's fine with me. But giving those examples and asking the students to consider the situation and then talk about strategies to help to address the situation, or to talk about how the readings that were assigned helped them to get a more clear understanding of that situation or that case or that problem. The responses can go in different ways. They can be posted to a discussion group, they can be sent back to the instructor, they can be posted to small groups for further discussion and elaboration. Maybe I'll stop at that point. This way you guys can talk about groups and or other strategies.
One thing that I was thinking about as we're listening to the distraction next door is that when I design learning activities, I need to reduce distractions. So when we design these activities, we need to make sure that we're providing information to students in multiple ways, so that if they learn best from reading, there's something to read. If they learn best from listening, there's something to listen to. If they learn best by watching a video, there's a video to watch. So we may present information in multiple modes so that everyone can be successful, so that they're not distracted or unable to engage because they can't access the information easily.
When it comes to online design, it's difficult to just think about the content without thinking about the technological affordances, what you can do with the technologies. So when I design online classes, I always keep in mind what the technology that's available to us that we can do with the technologies. So for Towson University, we all have access to Blackboard, and the discussion board is something that's very popularly used by faculty members to teach online classes. So, thinking about the pedagogy, we have, in our field, there is a framework called TPAC framework, and that's kind of integration of technology, pedagogical content, and knowledge. You need to integrate all those three together. So you want to know what you want to accomplish in this lesson or in this module, and then think about how you can have students accomplish this goal, what kind of activities you want to design, and at the same time think about what the technologies can do, whether the technologies can help you accomplish these goals. If you want students to collaborate, work with each other, do you want them to engage in a meaningful discussion, and if that's the case, what can you do within the technology platform you have. And if it's something the student can accomplish individually, they can do individual reading, and you want to bring them back to the classroom for discussion upon their reflection, and maybe you can set up a reflection journal type of activities for the students. So start with the learning objectives and then think about the type of activities or you want students to participate in, and then think about what the technology can help you to accomplish, and then you can bring all those things together to come up with a good instructional design for online classes.
I want to break in here and say that I misspoke earlier, and perhaps some of you caught it on the slide. We have no responses yet, and that could be a number of reasons, but one of the things is that you actually need to text the to field is 37607. So I flip-flop the two numbers. So when you open up your text message and you type 2, it's 237607, and then the body of the message is 332574. And then your message. So that could be me if you're not getting anything back. I apologize for that. I don't know if you guys have any other follow-up thoughts for this particular question, or... All right, well, we've got a couple other questions in this area, so we'll keep them coming. The second question, in terms of the broad topic of the design of online learning activities, we talk a lot about learning and wanting learning to be interactive, particularly in the online space where it can very much, a lot of people, it translates really well, and for some people with a straight lecture and delivery, right? We think of Blackboard as an information delivery system, but really we strive in our classrooms and certainly in our online environments to make it more interactive. Interactive is a slippery term, both I think from a theoretical perspective and also when we're doing research, right? What does it mean to be interactive? So one of the questions that I wanted to ask the panel is, what does it mean for you for online learning to be interactive? What are the interactive components? What does interactive even mean to you as you think about designing online learning activities?
For online interaction, there are different types of interaction. There is the human-computer interaction, the students interacting with the technology, and there is student-student interaction. You have students interact with each other, and there is instructor and student interaction. So there are different types of instructions, and you in online class, you probably want to have all those take place in the class. So depending on the specific type of interaction, and you can design different activities to make them interactive. Such as, to me, take the Blackboard discussion board posting, for example. To be interactive, meaningful interaction is that when students post a question or thought on a topic, and there will be other people responding to that thought and that specific topic, but that's not the end. And you want to engage to further, encourage students to further collaborate with each other. You might have some other students to post thoughts to the interaction between the first students, and maybe the first student can respond back to the response to his or her question. So encourage this type of activities to take place in the online platform is one type of interaction that can take place in the online environment. And that's something that's kind of unique with online instruction, is that it allows the asynchronous discussion, meaning the discussion can take place at different time and different locations. That's different from the traditional face-to-face class where it happens from 4:20 to 6:50, that period of time. But this one can be, this student posts something in the morning and other people work in the evening, and they can respond at different time and different locations. This allows students the time to reflect on the question, so they can think a little bit more deeper about the topic, and their responses sometimes can be more reflective. So that's one advantage with online instruction that we can take full advantage of.
So I actually went to the website. The PowerPoint slide download wasn't working, so I went to Plan 2. And we are getting some questions coming in. So I wanted to take one question in this topic before we move on to the next. Since we're talking about interaction, and we heard earlier about OLI and MOOCs, I was wondering if the panel has any thoughts about numbers of students and the restrictions on interaction or things you might have to think about in designing for interaction with larger numbers of students. I mean, I know that my personal experience with online teaching is classes of less than 20, and we keep it small on purpose to foster interaction, but I'm wondering what you think about maybe this translating to larger numbers, or how you foster interaction that way.
Well, you definitely have to change your way of thinking about teaching and learning depending on the size of your class when you're teaching online. Like Dr. Lohnes said, we often in the College of Education in our graduate programs try to keep the class sizes small so that we can maintain interaction and, from a faculty member's perspective, handle a discussion board. If we have 40 students in a class or 2,000 in an open MOOC, there's no way to manage a discussion board. We just can't handle all that information and manage that type of discussion. So you have to then reconsider how you're asking students to participate and how you're designing your activities in order to meet the needs of those larger groups.
And related to that too, if you do have a larger group, a mindset shift is that you are not the only one with the answers. So setting up the instructional activities so that students are facilitators of those discussions or commenters in those discussion boards is one way to accomplish that, so that you don't have to be in and active in every board every moment. But the other way to accomplish that too is to split them off into smaller groups for discussion. So you may have two simultaneous discussions going on with the same content, but you've broken the class into 2 or 3 smaller groups. So it's also manageable for you as well as them. Because I know when I participated in a MOOC a couple months ago, there was 2,000 people, and it quickly became unmanageable for me as a student. And then they broke us off into branches based on our interest area, and then it became manageable. So we can use that too.
One more quick question here. The on the top students report minimal participation in discussion boards. So what are some of the ways we can get students to read the posts? I mean, again, that depends on how the discussion board is integrated into your larger course, plan and activity. My students, I break them into groups. I have 4 small groups of 4 students. They discuss a case study, actually speaking of learning activities, from Wednesday to Friday on a given week. And then by Sunday, they have an individual reflection on the discussion due. So they're held accountable. That's graded, right? So they're held accountable for each discussion, but graded individually. I think this, for them, frees, group work freaks people out. My grade is going to be tied to, everyone else's work. So it frees up the discussion to be a little more, I want them to delve, to wonder, right? To be curious, to feel okay, to say, to play with ideas, right? So I think that frees up the discussion a little bit, but then having the accountability be individual, I ask them in their weekly reflection journal on the discussion to say, 1 or 2 things that were important points that emerged from the discussion, one thing that was still contentious or unresolved from the discussion, and one thing, one big takeaway, right, from the discussion, I think is the third one. So anyway, thinking about how to make those accountable. And in a smaller class, I can keep up with reading the journals and giving feedback. In a larger class, I think, again, we'd have to think of other strategies. All right, so I'd like to move on to the second topic, which is fostering collaboration and community among learners. So I'm going to put the first question to the panel while I bring up the poll for the next one. Note that each poll is going to have a slightly different number, so you're always going to fill in your message to field 37607, but this next poll will have a different number to text, so take a look at that as I flip over. In the meantime, I'd like the panel to talk a little bit about community. Why do we talk about community in terms of online learning? Is community important to online student success, and why, in your opinion?
Dr. Song and I have published an article about this a few years back, noticing the importance of community. When you think about a face-to-face classroom, and you think about the interactions that you have with the students and the interactions between student to student, you notice that students are excited to come to the classroom. They have understandings about what's going on maybe in your life in general, or even more specifically in their peers' lives in their classroom. They may talk outside of the classroom. That community is an important part to what the students see as an effective learning environment. And when we go online, there's a tendency to not have that opportunity. If I'm not in a class with another student, I might not have a tendency to talk to that student. I might never meet that student and wouldn't be able to communicate with them or know what's going on in their lives, or build that framework that helps me to build a context for what I'm learning and build an environment that I'm comfortable with. So we have to try and go out of our way to create those communities and those environments in our online classes, just as we do in our face-to-face classrooms. An easy way to do that is to start the course with introductions, or asking the students to create web pages in Blackboard. And that web page might have just some background information about them, where they work, in our instance, where they teach, what their hobbies are, maybe a picture of themselves or something like that. And it helps to build an understanding of where our peers are coming from, or if you respond to someone's discussion post, what their background is, and maybe what their ideas are and what their experiences are, to help us to get a context of what it is they're talking about. And that's important for community, and that's one effective way to build that community. There are others.
Thoughts?
Like Dr. Sadera mentioned, it's very important to start at the beginning with the introduction, and there are many other ways, like you do in traditional classroom, icebreaker activities, and you can do those equally effective in an online environment, and there are many different strategies, like in individual web pages, and you can set up, what sometimes I do is introduce themselves using 2 truths and 1 lie, and ask students to respond to each other to guess which one is a lie. And what you can do with online technology is sometimes maybe you may be surprised more effective than the face-to-face classroom, because it's there all the time. The text is permanent, where in a traditional classroom, the first introduction, after that, and if you forget, somebody mentioned they just got married, I don't remember which one, but in online class, and you can have that access to information all the time throughout the semester, so you have the opportunity to know about other students in the class better. So that's one thing. It's definitely important. The research in online education shows the importance of community in students' online learning, because the early findings in the research about online learners is that sometimes they could feel lonely in an online environment, and they post something, they feel like nobody's responding to me, and I posted, I wait for a day and there's no response, so they might feel lonely about that. But there are opportunities to help students to break that kind of loneliness. That's to help to build a sense of community in the environment. And regarding to one of the early questions I saw on the screen, some people asked about the minimum participation. Over time, students will realize the more, and that's something we tell them in the first day of online class, is that the more you contribute, the more you participate, the more you will get out of the participation, the discussion. And it's difficult for them to realize in the beginning, but over time they will realize if they are active participants in the online discussion, they tend to get more responses from other people as well. So that's kind of, we call social presence in the online environment. If you have a better presence yourself from the beginning, and you will find it very beneficial to your own learning as well. So that's something we need to teach the students, so they are aware of this and they will be motivated to build a stronger presence in the online environment.
I bet Linda's got something to say about this next one. So we're talking about community as really an underlying necessity to fostering collaboration, right? Which is so that students have a sense of accountability to the class, to each other, that they want to work together as a team. So once we've got some strategies for community building in place, maybe Dr. Macaulay can start us off thinking about what are some strategies that you use then to promote either student to student or student to teacher collaboration.
Well, I think one of the first things that I do is I make sure I'm very clear and I articulate expectations. So like you mentioned, they have a task to accomplish on a discussion board from Wednesday through Friday, and then over the weekend they have to work on individual reflection. Make sure you're very clear about what's expected between student-to-student interaction as well as interaction with you, so that they know what is expected of them and what the timelines are for that interaction. Related to that, a lot of times students will say they want contact with you, the faculty member. So make sure there is student-to-instructor interaction regularly. It doesn't necessarily always have to be in the public discussion board, though. So I will often send little email notes or private messages to students to say, hey, you're doing a really great job, you're really articulating your learning in this module, keep it up. Or I may say, you know, I don't really see your presence today or this week, and we really need you to be an active participant in order to get value out of the course. And typically speaking, when you do those little private asides with students, they step it up a notch. And occasionally you have one student that may be overpowering, so you may have to send that note to say, you're doing a great job, but let's let other people have a chance to comment before you cover it all in one post. So those are some of the things that I do behind the scenes that not all the students maybe know is happening, but it helps me keep in touch with the students so that they know that I'm there and I'm paying attention to what's being completed.
Do we want to sort of follow on it? It sort of touches a little bit on what Linda was just talking about. What do you do about those that respond briefly to discussions and don't get involved over and beyond what you might expect? So sending little messages to encourage participation was one strategy.
For encourage student participation, I think that the instructor's presence, like Lena mentioned, is very important as well. You have to let students know you are there and you are reading their messages. You don't have to respond, and I don't necessarily think we should respond to all student messages. That will be disastrous for our online class. But the student need to know we are there. We're reading their messages. So for the students who respond very briefly in the discussion board, if you don't see other students encouraging them to elaborate, and it's our role to make sure we respond to those type of postings and encourage. Could you elaborate on this topic, and would you please provide an example, illustrate what you mean, by saying this. So that's our job. And what I often do is I don't, respond to all student messages, but I find those kind of lonely messages. I do check every day to make sure, if the student's response, a posting doesn't get responses from other students, and I want to make sure I respond to that message so that the student gets her or his questions answered in a way. But if other students are answering the questions perfectly, I don't necessarily jump in that part of the discussion.
Yeah, I say at the very beginning of class, in our introductory session, here are the ways in which you'll see me, right? You'll see me, I do video introductions to every module, so you'll see me there and hear me. You'll see me giving you feedback on your 2 individual weekly assignments, so that's the private feedback. You'll see me in your discussion boards, and then of course if they want to email me individually. So just setting up at the beginning of class that idea that I'm there and here's how I'm going to be there, and might help a little bit with that as well.
One of the questions posted was about participation in discussion in the group discussion boards. It's important to give roles to those groups so that the students can't avoid those group discussion boards. So say, for example, the students were working on a case, and then you ask the students to work in groups to discuss the case. Assign specific roles, like one person may be a researcher, one person may be someone in the field, or one person may be someone who looks for answers to a specific question. And then they can't complete the case, they can't write a response to the case without each of the group members having completed that task.
And I see there is a question, again, this question shows, I think, the second time I see it. Do the students act differently online versus in traditional classroom setting? I do find some students, they do act differently. And thinking about personality, in the classroom setting, you will see some shy students, they hide, they don't really speak out. But in the online environment, they might act very differently because they feel more comfortable posting in the online environment because they feel like, there is a sense of it's not anonymous in a way, but they feel like they are not in front of the large crowd, not in front of other people. And sometimes, one of the reasons they don't participate much in classroom discussion might be they don't feel very confident about what they're trying to say. But in the online environment, like I said, asynchronous discussion, it gives them the time. So you ask them to respond to some kind of guiding questions, and they have the time to do the reading, they have the time to think about what they want to say, and so they have the opportunity, so they might feel more comfortable posting in the online environment. At the same time, for those overpowering students in the classroom setting, is the instructor can facilitate to help monitor and to control the situation in the online environment, and you can find some ways to manage that to make sure everybody has a voice in online discussion.
I think it's interesting that we're talking about a lot of the same best practices for good teaching and learning, right, in face-to-face spaces, but thinking about how we can do it in online spaces. One other thing I wanted to add to do they act differently? And I find sometimes that, especially in a semester-long, fully online course, students forget that there are people behind the text that's being typed. Me, for example, they forget that I have feelings and might send messages that are less friendly than you might get, if you see me week to week and see that, I am a human being with all sorts of things going on, just the same as they are. So I try to be sympathetic to them. They, try to be sympathetic to me, and sometimes to other people as well. So I think this idea of building community can help mitigate some of that, and to remind people that there are people with schedules and lives and families and all sorts of obligations, and everyone's trying the best that they can help. And frankly, I do, to really help that, I actually do a optional online face-to-face meeting in the first week of class for people to do some of these activities. I also have a whole set of online activities that mirrors the same thing, but I find it just helps a semester move more smoothly when people can see personalities and know that it's not just, sometimes text doesn't translate well, and sometimes emails don't translate well, so that's definitely a consideration as well.
The other thing, too, related to what you're talking about is we are not limited to text anymore.
Right.
So we can have students recording a video and posting themselves as part of their introduction, so we can see students if you don't have that opportunity to have a face-to-face class meeting. So, 5 years ago, we were pretty much stuck with a text discussion board response, but now Blackboard, which is our medium, has buttons right in the toolbar to be able to attach other media and other files. And our students today are fairly savvy about posting things to YouTube and such. So why not offer that as another option so that our students' learning styles and needs can be met, as well as continuing to build that community in a rich way?
All right, so thank you guys for your thoughts on this topic. I'd like to move on to the next topic, so we're moving right along, and we get at least a little bit of discussion on them all. The next topic is strategies for feedback and evaluation in online courses. And of course, we've started to touch on some of that already. It seems like all of these topics really do go together and build on one another. But the first question that I'd like to ask, as I get the polling software going, to have you guys maybe talk about, what are some strategies to help manage workload for the instructor in online courses? We all want to give feedback. We know that that's important. We heard about feedback loops in the presentation this morning, and the importance of these feedback loops in designing instruction and continuing instruction, and that can be time consuming, so especially when we don't have a wonderful system like the one we saw doing some of that data mining for us. So what are some of the strategies that you guys use to help manage workload and still give the feedback that you want to give?
I guess I'll start with the fact that don't be fooled into thinking that teaching online is easier than teaching face-to-face. It is not.
Probably preaching to the choir on that
right.
one.
But I want to make sure that we all have a clear understanding about that. Teaching online is a significant amount of work, and it takes dedication and time that's different to what traditional instruction dedication and time is. So with regard to providing feedback, there are a variety of different ways to do that. I'll mention one and hopefully leave others for Liyan and Linda to pick up on. One way to do it is allowing students or asking students to create learning journals. And in those learning journals, they may post the reflections that Sarah was talking about. They may respond to questions each week or each module, depending upon how you organize the course. And then after those reflections are posted in those journals, then you visit the journals and then give them feedback upon how they did that week or how they did through the course of that module. You can comment on their participation in the discussion boards, the work that they did in support of their peers, and how they responded to the questions, or how they connected what they had learned to their experiences and to their existing understandings. And that helps both to give you a gauge of how they're doing with regard to the material that's being learned, as well as have them get a better understanding of how they're doing with regard to participation in the course and completing the expectations of the instructor.
I can address perhaps more of a nuts and bolts way that I manage my time to keep track of all of the feedback that I need to give to students. And as I scan the room, a lot of us have iPads in front of us. So I have actually migrated all of my grading to grading on my iPad with iAnnotate. So I could give written feedback that I write with my finger or type. And then I also can give audio feedback because there's a voice recorder feature in iAnnotate, and then I send it back to the student. So just from a time factor, think about all that you have to write back to students in an online course. I don't necessarily have to write it all because I actually record. And I think that adds to the community building again, because they're hearing me as opposed to just reading a static message where perhaps my tone or my real message would get lost in just a text response. So that's one of the ways I manage the grading piece, by using the technology tools that I have available to me to give them feedback in a rich way.
What was that, iAnnotate?
iAnnotate. It is $10 typically, although it goes on sale from time to time, but it's worth every penny because it's better than all the other ones out there. I mean, if you want a free one, Paperport Notes also does similar things, but it doesn't have nearly the features to be able to get the files in there quickly and easily, so I highly recommend iAnnotate.
I'm going to speak to one of the questions that were asked earlier about since participation is so critical, how do you evaluate student participation? In our practices with online teaching, that we do evaluate student participation. There is participation grade, and the research has mixed findings about how to evaluate student participation in the Blackboard discussion board posting, and most people do relate this to the number of postings they have, but at the same time, we have to do it because there has to be a quantity to make sure there is quality. What I often say to students is that you can claim that you are learning without posting. That's possible. You know, I'm reading all other people's postings, and I'm learning. I just, you don't see my participation. But I often respond to students is that you are learning from other people. It's so you're benefiting from other people's postings. It's very important you contribute to the discussion so other people can learn from you as well. So we emphasize the participation by posting part, and we have the minimum number of postings. They have to answer the questions. We also emphasize the quality of their postings as well. And this part of feedback evaluation we often do. I know when Bill and I taught the classes, we do this through the private journal area. They have their journal reflections, so we post our feedback to that private area, which is only accessible to them and to them only. Not other students won't be able to see it. And this is very important. This is the place where you can tell students, oh, you're doing great with the participation. I don't see a lot of your participation. I know you have many valuable thoughts on the topic. I hope to see your contribution to the discussion boards, to give them this type of feedback to encourage them participation in future modules and discussions. So that's kind of something I wanted to add to this part.
One other item.
I have something I can also add that's been very effective related to classroom management. Even though we're online, we still have to manage the classroom. And one of the things that I've done that I think helps with managing the extraneous emails requesting for support or clarification is that I post this is what we did this week or today, this is what you need to do next, and what the deadlines are for that, and this is some things you could be working on to get ahead or looking forward. And it's kind of a status of the class type email or announcement post that I put in Blackboard and then also email to the students. So that way they can kind of keep tabs. Are they on track? And frankly, it helps me remember where I'm at in my lesson planning to make sure I'm on track. And then it cuts down on the emails. When is that paper due? Or what do we have to read this week? Because it's posted for everyone to see.
Yeah, what I was going to say was in line with Liyan talking about quality posts. It's important at the onset of the course to define what a quality post is and to explain what you expect students to be writing when they make those posts. Then if you were to use a learning journal or a private discussion area or even through email, you can refer to that if you find that students are making posts that say things like, I agree, or me too. You can remind them, this is what we expect with regard to a quality post, and these are the types of things we're looking for when we see you participate in the discussion.
So do any of you use rubrics to define those criteria that you were just talking about for
Yes.
student participation?
Absolutely. I have rubrics for both online discussions as well as the group interactions that we do. When Bill was talking about assigning roles, I actually have a little rubric that the students use to assess themselves and their teammates on various criteria, and then they can use that to provide me feedback for the things that I may not be able to see or know about from the final product.
All right. I think it's interesting with the poll software that it kind of trickles in a group later, which is interesting. So something to keep in mind when I use this in the future. Make sure there's a little lag time. Let's move on to the last topic. We've got about 10 minutes left together. And the last broad topic we were going to talk about is the technological design of the online course environment. So again, I'll bring up the poll information, but in the meantime, what I'd like the panel to maybe think about and address, we've talked a lot about Blackboard so far because at Towson, that is our course management system, right, that we have. And we tend to think of that as the standard platform for online learning. But there are options outside of Blackboard. I mean, I imagine for fully online courses, I do, and I think most of you guys do, correct me if I'm wrong, use that as the primary platform because it does, I find it useful for structure, and structure and organization is really important for clarity and consistency and those sorts of things. But we do use a variety of other tools to help with some of these other online learning activities. Liyan talked about affordances, right? What are some of the technological affordances of tools? And we want to think about what certain tools do well and how we might be able to incorporate those in certain ways. So what other technologies can be used for online learning? When might you use those tools and why?
For technological design of online classes, I think two issues are extremely important. One is consistency, the other is clarity. To be consistent means like if you have different modules for different chapters, different units of your course, make sure the design for each unit and each module is consistent throughout. So when students go to complete the first module, they know what to expect for the second module. So there is, minimum requirement for them to learn how to navigate. And clarity, because of online environment, there is lack of face-to-face interaction. When students have questions about the syllabus, when students have questions about the assignments, and that will come to you through whether it's via email or Blackboard posting, and this can be related to workload as well. Is that if you can make the assignments and syllabus as clear as possible to the students, that will reduce the number of questions students may have regarding those things, and then can help you manage your workload in a little bit. So it's try to think a way when you design those things to just keep those in mind when you put together a syllabus and assignments description. That will be helpful.
Something that I have been using for the last several years that adds a more synchronous component to an online course is WebEx. So it is a web conferencing software that you would need to talk to your department about having an access host account for that. But it is an opportunity then to meet synchronously at the same time, but in different places, via the web. As long as you have a microphone, you can speak to your students, you can share your computer screen, they can share their screen with you. And a little public service announcement, I'm doing a workshop on that this afternoon with LaTanya Dyer next door. So if you want to learn more about that, by all means join us. But it is a great way to kind of bring back that face-to-face feel that maybe some folks miss when they take an online course, because you can actually see each other. If you had a webcam, you can hear each other, you can talk to each other, and you can collaborate and share. And I often tell students and other faculty that I can do everything that I would do in a regular classroom on campus here in WebEx. And I have, due to weather or swine flu and all these other things that we've dealt with over the last several years. My classes would go on as scheduled even if it was a typical face-to-face, because I had access to a WebEx account. So it's something that adds that face-to-face dynamic as well.
Can I ask a quick follow-up to that before Bill jumps in? So when would you think about designing, use the term synchronous, right? So all the students are working together at the same time versus asynchronous, which I think is what we typically have. Students aren't necessarily logged on at the same time and aren't necessarily working together at the same time. So what are some, when do you use synchronous activities versus asynchronous activities?
One thing we have to think about is can we require students to come to a set time and day for an online class? So luckily for me, my courses have been designed such that I am able to do that because the students know it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 11 o'clock. So I can say a Wednesday at 11 is WebEx. But if you are in a truly purist online course that's 24/7, I think you have to put those out there as options. But you can't require students to come, but then record them so that the students who can't attend that synchronous session can still get the content. But I typically pick those WebEx days to be content that is absolutely critical, that I know everybody understands what I'm expecting of them. So it could be a key assignment that I'm explaining or that we're working on together so that we can get together and collaborate in real time, and I can clear up any miscommunication or uncertainties so the students can be successful their first time out of the gate. So that's typically when I use it. The other time I use it is when I know students just need additional support, so it could be an online office hour or an online study group. I have students request WebEx time so that they can work on group projects synchronously. They might be at home in their pajamas in their living room, but they're all able to get together and work. And that helps with their busy schedules as well. So those are probably 2 or 3 of the key times that I use that interface.
2 other technologies you might consider using would be Jing and the DMC that's available at CIAT. They do slightly different things. Jing is a free online tool that allows you to record audio and do screen captures. So if you wanted to give an example of something being done on your computer screen or just give an introduction to a module, that's a good way to do it. You can share a web address or put it directly into your Blackboard site to share with your students. The DMC tool allows you to do a presentation alongside a video of yourself, and that's another way to introduce a topic or to talk about some material that you're looking to have them get a better understanding of.
All right, we'll quickly answer, how is WebEx different than Skype? WebEx, you can think of, it's sort of enterprise level software. A lot of the software that we use comes from the business world, right? So WebEx is one of them. It's just really full featured, so you can have, it's video conferencing software in some ways, right? Mm-hmm. So you can see everyone who has a camera. Skype, you can see people too, so that's a commonality with Skype. But above and beyond that, WebEx, students can share documents, you can share documents. So you've got on screen at the same time people and videos, documents that everyone is working on or looking at together. The instructor and the students, if you give them the power, can take over the screen and annotate the documents and lead a discussion of documents. You could have slides going at the same time, so it's sort of a more full-featured. And as Linda said, if you want to know more about WebEx, there will be a session later this afternoon.
And you can report it.
And you can record
Yes.
it, right, and archive it, which is really valuable for students to go back later and saves, again, time management, saves you the, I wasn't there when you introduced, or I don't understand this particular assignment, so you can, point them back to the video. So I know we're coming toward the end of our time, but since we started a little late, I'm going to take a couple extra minutes and open this up to more traditional audience questions. So again, try to hit multiple media here. So for the folks who may not have had access to asking on Poll Everywhere or didn't want to, are there any questions that you'd like to put to the panel on any of these topics or anything related?
Is that one working though? Because I can try to.
There you go. I've got one in the back of the room.
I could talk loudly.
Test.
Couple of questions. This has been great, thank you.
You want to meet me?
Okay. In a number of online courses that have been taught in my college, we have been told later on that the students submitting the work or doing the posts or the exams or what have you are not the students enrolled in the course. So what do you do? What are your policies, procedures, and what precautions do you take about that? That's A, and while I've got the mic, I'll ask my second question. The piece you just brought up about WebEx and archiving it, because we also use WebEx a lot and we archive, but more recently we've been having preliminary conversations about ownership, essentially, and consent from students to have those recordings available.
I can address the consent issue. There's actually a document that we have here at Towson that we are using as an online consent form, that if we are using WebEx, we are supposed to be having students consent to those recordings. So what I've done in those courses is I've created it as a Blackboard test, and then I basically make it a yes or no question. Yes, I consent to being recorded or not, and I make sure that everybody has consented. Otherwise, we have to come up with another plan if somebody would rather opt out of that. But it has been vetted by our legal analysts, I guess, here at the university. So as long as we do that, we are okay to record and archive those WebEx recordings. But I think that's critical that we make sure we do that the first week of classes and get that on file.
So the mumbling is, that's a tough one for the first part, the first question.
I think it depends on what you're asking the students to do. That would help to avoid the opportunity for them to have someone else do the work. The more rigorous the task, the less likely they're going to find a peer that wants to do it, unless they're paying for it. In all instances, there's academic integrity that's involved, and these are decisions that the students have to make on their own. If you expect rigor and you expect participation and you build a community that's based upon those ideas, I think there will be less a chance that students will pursue those opportunities.
And also, too, if you're requiring more than just a text-based response, it's pretty hard to have your spouse do your video recording for an assignment, because if you do those introductions that first week of class, they're going to have their picture up in their My Places on Blackboard. They're going to have information about themselves, and then you have their voice. You get their tone of writing established before they might have figured out that they might need someone else to help them. So then you can compare the quality of work that's being submitted, and I don't really want to be the police to try to decide if it's the real person doing the work. So hopefully we design instruction that makes them want to do it and able to do it, and we don't have to deal with it. But right now we don't have any software on campus to assure that it's the real person doing the work.
Well,
if you think about the difference between online class and the face-to-face class, and the student can still have somebody else complete assignments in the face-to-face class and submit it to you. The only difference, I think, is the interaction piece, the participation piece. In the face-to-face, you know they are there in your class. In the online, you're not sure whether it's them posting. Like Bill mentioned, if you design the activity in a way that they have to complete the readings, and they have to post the responses, they have to engage in, discussion with other people, and basically, unless they're paying them, it will be difficult for somebody else to be in that role to do those kind of activities.
Let's take a couple more questions because I see some hands.
Probably just asking, does Towson provide all the technology necessary to participate in online courses, or are they required, like, purchasing books? So you mentioned webcams. If they would need webcam to make a video, or is there a certain demographic that's shut out?
Good questions. I think we know what. Oh, sorry. Sure. The question was, does Towson provide all the technologies necessary to participate in the ways we've been talking about, or are there certain students who are shut out of online learning because of what they may or may not have access to? Which is a great question. Blackboard has been the backbone of what all of us have been talking about, and Blackboard is available to all students for free. In most cases that we've encountered, students haven't had a problem. Well, I should also say that I don't know that we have a ton of our courses. Some of our online courses are part of required courses, and some of them are electives. So I guess that also plays into it too, right? If you're going to have a required course, most of our, but for an elective, students self-select into it. In some ways, they self-select out. Not that that's a good answer. But I think, so Blackboard's available. Many of the other tools that we've been talking about are free on the web, right? Jing is free. WebEx, we have some availability through Towson. The Digital Media Classroom is here at Towson. So, one of the things we do think about are free tools. So in the end, I think the access point that we're talking about is internet access, because most of these are free online technologies. And so that's probably a bigger question. We ask students they certainly have spaces, this defeats the purpose a little bit, but some spaces on campus where students can come to do their online work. Public libraries have free access, right? So there are other access points in the community, but I don't know that there's a policy level statement. I don't know if you guys know about access and what we do about access in that sense.
I mean, so far I haven't had a student report to me that they were unable to do, say, for example, a video recording to introduce themselves to a class, because they can use their cell phones and things that they almost all have, or they can sign out equipment from the library here on campus as well.
And we have a lab as well, but that was another thing I was going to say. Some of the more highly technical pieces, like video recording, may be optional, right? So not required for a grade. I mean, it's nice to say that just because someone's 20 or 30 that they know how to use a webcam. That's not always the case, I find. It's my own particular research interest. But so if we're not giving them the not just the access to the tools, but the assistance to do it, maybe that's not a required graded component of the course. Maybe one or two other questions. Can we get one more?
There was a question, actually, a poll response earlier that didn't quite make it into the conversation. I'm wondering about how can we move towards more profile-based course management systems, or should we be doing that? How does that affect that learning environment?
Can we and should be are two different things.
Yeah. Either of those.
And I think the up-and-coming update to Blackboard is more profile-oriented, but I don't know when we're updating to that. So I can't really speak to when that will happen, but I think it's more what I'll call more Facebook-like and more community-oriented, so that there will be student profiles able to be loaded. Whether they choose to will be up to the student, but I think that's coming.
I mean, I've used Ning before to do, never to run a fully online course, but instead of Blackboard in other courses, because I like the way it's a course on Web 2.0. Blackboard's not terribly Web 2.0, so I want to practice what I preach, so I use Ning instead, right? So there are drawbacks, though. Ning right now is not free, so I have to pay for it if I want to use it, and depending on the number of students, et cetera. So yeah, it sort of goes back to that access question. Everyone has access to Blackboard. We all have access to Blackboard. In some ways, we're a little tied into Blackboard, but there are other ways that we can supplement. But I have heard the rumor as well that Blackboard's next version is moving. I mean, they're really interested in trends outside, right, in the field, and in trends with what students are doing in their everyday lives, and I think trying to incorporate those slowly into their interface as well. Can I push it to one more question? All right, one more question we've got in the back.
Do you have time to walk us through the text messaging, the texting call? This is really cool, and it didn't work for my iPhone, but
How about we'll probably have a couple of minutes to shift sessions, and if anyone's interested during the break, why don't you come up and I'll show you just what I did really quick. How about that?
How about the I annotated audio?
I mean, certainly during the break and over lunch, I can show people if they're interested. So look for me at the end here if you'd like to know some more.
All right, and I think we'll wrap up there. So thank you all very much for coming. Thank you for your good questions, and enjoy the rest of your day.